Hello, I'm Tristan, Product Manager at DeltaXML. Welcome to the XML Compare product demo. In this short demo video, we'll be going through who uses our products, why they use our products, an explanation of the product itself, and of course we'll be showing you the product in action. In this particular video, I'm going to be explaining the XML Compare product and why you might want to use it to manage changes to documents in your publishing lifecycle. So let's begin. The first question to ask is, who might need to use our product and why? Our products are normally used by people who've got large amounts of complex documents, where reviewing those documents or reviewing the changes that happen to them is difficult. It might be a lot of hard work to do that. It might be that your documents are under some form of regulation, and it's absolutely critical that you're able to show exactly how they change from one version to the next. So how might people do that at the moment? One of the things that we often see with customers is that they are, believe it or not, using visual inspection to find the differences between two documents. They have printed copies side by side and turn the pages one at a time, or have them up on screen side by side and read through them, trying to manually find changes. That's obviously a huge amount of work. When you've got big documents, that's going to take a long time, and more problematic is that it's error prone. If you miss changes, miss differences between those two documents, then you're not going to be able to highlight those for a reviewer or for whoever it is that needs to see your changes. Some people realize that that's not the best method to use, and they've moved on to using something like a line-by-line comparison tool. People who are familiar with Unix might use something like the Unix diff tool, or if you've got an XML authoring tool, that might give you some form of line-by-line comparison. People are familiar with this kind of result. The main problem with it is that it doesn't tend to understand XML, so it's treating XML structures as text files. The problem there is that you get a lot of false positives, so it will be showing you differences that aren't really differences. They're different textually, but because it doesn't understand the syntax of XML, those aren't real changes. It's also really difficult to take the result of that tool and to process the results in an XML way. Such tools typically give you a line report of the differences, and it's difficult to use that in an XML workflow to process the change or to perhaps even publish the change. So another tool that people often use is track changes. If you're using an XML authoring tool that contains a way of tracking changes, that can actually be very useful for highlighting where a document changes and viewing those changes in the review process. We're not saying that those shouldn't be used, they're very useful. But one of the problems is that you may find that there are inconsistencies. Those sort of tools can be turned on and off by the editor. If an editor or author forgets to turn the change tracking on, then you're not going to get that recorded. And there are also limitations depending on the tools that you're using. They may not be able to track changes to attributes or tables, for example, and they don't always give you the kind of granularity that you need. They're very good for showing exactly what's changed as you type, but once you've got a few different versions of a document, storing the changes as track changes throughout all those different versions is going to give you a lot of complexity, which might look very messy. What you often need is an overview of how the document has changed from the first version to the last, rather than all that detail. What do we offer as a solution at DeltaXML? The product I want to talk about is XML Compare, a software component which runs behind the scenes in your existing content workflow and gives you a dependable XML comparison. It works with any XML content. We're focusing particularly on documentation in this video, so we're talking about things like DITA, DocBook, S1000D, and the custom documentation formats that our customers have often developed. As long as that's in XML, then we can help you out. The output that you get from that tool is another XML file. It's in a very familiar format. It looks very much like your input documents, with some extra markup to clearly identify where changes have occurred. And it's structured in such a way that you can then process it further with your normal XML tools or pass it into a review process. We'll take a look at some examples in a moment. It's very important to stress at this point that we don't have a very pretty user interface. At DeltaXML, we focus on what we're good at, and that is developing the comparison algorithms and processing XML. We've got patented result formats, and that's what we focus on. That's what we're good at. We produce a tool which is intended for integration into your systems through APIs, whether that's the Java API or the .NET API or other kinds of integration mechanisms. That's the intention for the tool. If you're not a development shop, if you don't have those skills, that's fine. We can help you out, or we can put you in touch with a partner who can help you to integrate the tool. So let's take a look at some simple XML files. Here's a very simple document. I just happen to be using Ditta, but that doesn't really matter. It's a typical sorted document. It's got a title and a few paragraphs, and there are some changes between the two versions. It's not particularly easy to see the changes here. You can see that perhaps the number of paragraphs has changed, but in terms of the detail, just looking at the text, you would have to read it in some level of detail to see where the changes are. If we look at the XML content of that as well, again it's not very obvious where the differences are. They look fairly similar in structure, but you wouldn't immediately spot the differences. These are very simple examples. Obviously in reality you'd be working with a much bigger document. It may be much more complicated, and that just worsens the problem and makes it even harder. If we take a look at the result file that XML Compare will produce, we get something like this. You can see it's a familiar structure. It happens to look very much like a Ditta document still, but it's got some differences. We have items like this DeltaXML Delta V2, which is how the differences are marked up. We call the input documents A and B, and throughout the document we use these attributes to show where the changes are. For any element, it will show which documents it was in, the A document or the B document or both. And if it's in both, were they equal or were they not equal? Here we've got some inequality from the root of the document down. Some things to highlight are inline text changes. Here we have a paragraph which has got some text which changed in line. We introduced this element called a text group, which gives you the detail of what text changed between the two versions. Block level addition and deletion is marked here. For example, that's a deletion of a paragraph marked with a delta of A or a delta of B to say that it's only in one of the inputs, therefore it's a deletion or an addition. And then we've got some slightly more subtle changes. You might want to see attribute change. That's not always obvious within an authoring tool, but if you need to understand how attributes change, then we have this structure here which describes how attributes change, how attributes are deleted, and how attributes are added. So those kinds of things may not be picked up by line tools in the same way. They certainly wouldn't be represented in a structure like this that enables you to then further process the result and turn it into something useful. What's good about this result is that you can then take it into an authoring tool. I'm demonstrating this in Oxygen, and render it as a WYSIWYG document. You can add styling such as this to show where the changes are. So you can see that the inline text changes are marked with some styling. We've got the block level deletions and additions that we've highlighted, and you can even show how attributes change in that view as well. So this is exactly the same file, just rendered with some CSS to show where the changes are. How do we process a result like that? Here you see a diagram which represents what's going on under the hood with XML Compare. There's a comparison block in the middle, and there are input files and our result file. But we've created an architecture that allows you to inject XSLT either before or after the comparison to transform the XML at various points to achieve different outputs. You might want to create a valid Ditta document, for example, that contains Ditta markup to show the changes. You might want to create a track change view of the result so that you can look at your changes in Oxygen or XMetal, Arbortext or Adobe FrameMaker. You might want to produce a summary in HTML that provides a report on exactly what's changed. All of those things are possible with this pipelining architecture. You develop XSLT to process the delta result to produce the different outputs that you need. And again, that's something that we or a partner can help you with if you don't have that expertise. So how reliable is DeltaXML? Well, we're used in all sorts of industries by all sorts of companies who are regulated or have some critical need to be able to show change reliably. Whether that's Boeing or Lufthansa in aerospace with aircraft manuals, GlaxoSmithKline or Siemens Health in pharmaceuticals, publishing, finance, semiconductors, we're used in all of these industries as well as many, many more, where technical documentation is absolutely key and critical to what they're doing. Thanks for listening.